Searching for lost media is both a curse and a blessing, depending on what type of person you are. For some people, they might be interested in a particular search topic, or take a stab at trying to find something, but can put it down and focus on other things. For me, however, it's usually the complete opposite. The majority of lost media topics I've researched over the years have become obsessions to the point where I can't stop thinking about them until I gain a new lead or make good progress that will eventually lead me to my goal. I simply have to be on top of things like that, and curiously, this is no exception when it comes to collectibles either. If I see a plush or figure online that I have to add to my collection, I usually don't stop looking until I find one for sale. And this sets the stage for a little journey I went on not too long ago. This could be considered a speed run for how rapidly and non-stop my search was in trying to obtain a collectible so rare I didn't even know if it was something that released. Now, this all started because of a video game character named Terry Bogard. I didn't know who Terry was or what series he was from when he was first announced in Smash, but once he released, I got really curious about the character, so I bought the DLC. His playstyle quickly grew on me, and as a result, I looked closer into his series of origin, Fatal Fury, which was so cool that in turn led me down a whole rabbit hole of other SNK games. These games were pretty eye-opening to me that they even existed at all, and I hadn't known about them up until this point. So after a good few months of experiencing them, I decided I had to add the characters in them to my collection of video game memorabilia, beginning with my new favorite, Terry. Though the problem is I had no idea what kinds of Terry merchandise even existed, so I went down a little rabbit hole of that too, finding lots of older keychains and plushes that were released back in the 90s. Most of this merch was only released in Japan, so I knew it would be hard to find. But the problem was, I actually didn't like most of it. None of it emitted the intensity Terry had in Smash, and I really wanted some kind of centerpiece for my collection. This led me to dig even deeper and look for SNK merchandise that was released for other games not Fatal Fury related. And then I found Capcom vs SNK 2 toys. This was one of the games my brother bought back when I was digging through SNK's library, and to this day, I still think it's one of the greatest retro fighting games ever created, but I didn't know there was any merchandise released for it. Apparently there were lots of different sets released under this line, including Gashapon minifigures and a standard line of posable action figures. Though, there was something really odd about these products. They covered so many of the major characters like Ryu, Kyo, and Iori, and even had surprising additions like Geese Howard and Homaru. But strangely, it looked like there was nothing made for Terry. How was this possible? Terry was SNK's mascot back in the day. Why wouldn't they make a figure of him to promote such a big fighting game? Turns out, through some lost media magic, I was able to find old reports from toy websites that talked about the line back when it was new, and apparently, Terry was planned to be released in Series 3 of the main line, but was cancelled before production and was never released. That explains exactly why Terry is absent from this line, and I started to accept defeat that I'd have to buy some bad-looking 90s figure and call it a day, until more articles from that same website with the cancelled Terry caught my eye. I started reading through them and came to one that mentioned something I had never heard of up to this point, a 12-inch series of action dolls from the Capcom vs SNK 2 line. These looked really cool, with a prototype image of Ken shown off. He had a great head sculpt, decent articulation, and fabric clothing, making the figure a really nice centerpiece. But looking further down the page is where things get really hype. This article states the rest of the 12-inch doll line contains Ryu, Iori, and Terry, with another article linked right underneath. Upon clicking that open, you see the other figures are shown in production images, which includes Terry himself, and dang does he look cool. Vinyl leather jacket, textured denim pants, and posability, allowing for the recreation of his classic moves. This was my Terry centerpiece. This is the figure I wanted for my collection. However, a quick search for these figures pulled up next to nothing for these, with Ryu and Ken being the only two who have minimal results. Terry and Iori have nothing outside of that original article, and if you scroll down a bit on one of the previous pages, you can actually see prototype head sculpts of Kyo and Akuma. As far as I know, Kyo and Akuma were never released, and these are the only evidence of their existence. Which got me thinking maybe Terry and Iori were planned to be released, but never actually did, which is why Ryu and Ken are the only characters you can kinda find in the wild. The challenge was accepted. How long would it take me to find this nearly non-existent figure at 3:30 in the morning? The search was on, though curiously I didn't start looking for Terry right away, and went with a different strat, which would allow me to get a better idea on the rarity of these characters in general. Similar to my quick search before, Ryu and Ken were the most accessible, with one listing for each character having been found on two completely different and obscure websites, but that was it. I couldn't find anything else about the release of these characters, so I moved on to Iori, which led me to a database page on my figure collection, of the figure on a blue background. This was pretty interesting, as the action figure website from before didn't show this picture, and I thought maybe it was an in-hand shot. I started getting hyped thinking I was closer to finding someone with it, but unfortunately through more looking, I found out that the image was just a repost from another completely different article from the figure website. It was so bizarre to me that there wasn't a single trace of Terry or Iori actually being in someone's possession, on top of the fact that I discovered old forum posts with generally the same sentiment. One was a review-based post, which claimed to have photos of the Terry doll, though no longer could be accessed even on Wayback Machine, so I'm not sure if these were new ones or just the same ones from the figure website. However, that didn't matter too much, as a few more posts from elsewhere also claimed to have gotten test copies of the figures from the company for reviewing purposes, which further led me to believe they were cancelled and only exist as prototypes, which apparently someone has. Most of my hope was gone at this point, as I considered the likelihood of Terry just never having been released, when a series of arbitrary Capcom vs SNK2 figure searches just happened to strike gold, when a listing on a website called Yaocow happened to appear. It was literally just the right combination of search words and scrolling down really far into the image results to find it, but at last I did. I can, without a doubt, confirm Terry did release, and this is proof. A boxed figure. Needless to say, I scoured the page looking for any way I could possibly buy this, especially considering the listing itself had a price of $40 and was only 1 month old. It looked like one of those sites where you have to meet the person to get the item, but I decided trying to find their contact info and offering to pay for shipping was the best option. Though, as you can expect from a site as weird as this, it wasn't that easy to navigate, and I couldn't figure out how to use it for info. I noticed at the bottom of the page it said from eBay.com, so then it hit me to check WorthPoint and eBay Archive and see if the listing showed up. Surprisingly, I found it, the exact listing from Yaocow, and apparently it was sold on March 21st, 2017. I found a few other listings too, even one with Iori, further confirming both of these characters did release. However, the rate in which they appear online is painfully slow, with the listings having shown it had been 3 years since the last Terry was up, and at a rate of 1 for sale per year. I got a couple good pictures of the figure, but that was all I could do. There was just no way to buy this figure, because there just weren't any to buy, right? Honestly, I just didn't believe that, even for as rare as this figure was. Every rare piece of merchandise I have was for sale at one point in time, and considering the obscurity of this figure line, I thought there must be someone somewhere who has it, and has just been sitting on it for years with no one having bothered to look for it. Early on, I found Ryu and Ken from those obscure sites, so there had to be a Terry out there. I convinced myself that there was. Several more searches followed, with the most creative combinations of search words I could possibly think of, hoping some result would show up, and once it did, I was not disappointed. Finally, after a couple hours of searching, the website that popped up wasn't even in English, it was in Italian. An Italian comic book shop called Delta Comics, which somehow had a listing for a mint inbox Terry doll from almost 2 decades ago. I really couldn't believe it. Just the fact that they even had this listed online was huge, since they exist as a physical store too, and I'm not even sure if their store inventory is the same in person as is on their site. They had no other characters from this line, only Terry, and they didn't even have very much video game merchandise to begin with. I had to translate the page to make sure this was in stock, since my biggest fear was that I was going to see the listing had already been sold out. But thankfully it hadn't been. I had found my Terry doll. Curious to see how many they had, I tried adding a few to the cart, but only one would go through. So this was it, but unfortunately I hit another issue. This site doesn't ship internationally, so there was no way to get it out of Italy and into the USA, though I had another option. Through some less than exciting looking around, I was able to find a forwarding service called Parcel, which ships to a middleman within the country of origin, who then sends the package to anywhere you ask. I went through the whole process just hoping none of the transactions would get held up. Thankfully, none of that happened, and after a couple weeks of waiting, the package came and Terry was in great condition. I was really surprised to see the box in such good shape and still completely sealed. I originally wanted to open it up and pose him, recreating the moves from the game, but I decided I would probably never find another mint condition one, and the box itself has really nice game artwork on it, which adds to how well it displays. I even kept the Italian price tag on the box as a memento for how much effort I had to go through to get this, ending my search. But it was all worth it, and I'm glad this didn't become a years-long search with not much to do outside of looking on Japanese sites. Something that I really found interesting is the fact that the company who made the Capcom vs SNK 2 figures were Japanese, but as far as I can tell, they never released over there. Usually American companies will localize Japanese-made figures, but it seems like this line was exclusive to the US, though maybe if it did release in Japan, I wouldn't have had as much difficulty getting one, since there would have been more around. I'm really happy with Terry, and by far this was one of my quickest searches ever, going from no idea if the figure even released, to having found that available listing in only around 3 hours. And all because I bought some Smash Bros. DLC. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other game-related Lost Media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.